thoughtful ideas and suggestions for guests and topics.
Events, programs, and
Welcome to this week's segment of Dialogue Houston. I'm your host, Lawrence Payne. To our regular viewing audience, welcome. To those joining us perhaps for the first time for HCC's TV Dialogue Houston, we can be found now every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 a.m. and again at 6 p.m. and Saturday afternoons at 3 p.m. To our regular viewing audience, we always thank you in the beginning of the show for your thoughtful ideas for guest topics and subjects to be covered on future segments of Dialogue Houston. For after all, this is your community affairs, public affairs show here on HCC TV, proudly now in its 27th season. We have a great show planned for you today. We're going to look at something that's important to all of us. And we're doing it, as you remember, under this special edition that we do now as part of Dialogue Houston with our friends from the Houston Public Library. It is called The Wonderful Living in New Knowledge. It features a regular basis work of the public library and people involved in the work of the public library. Remember, this is your public library serving the citizens of Houston since 1904. It has truly been our link to the world. You can have access, as always, free of charge to the great resources of the Houston Public Library by just getting your own MyLink card. This wonderful MyLink card, which is your library card. All you need is this card and your PIN number. If you do not have a card, you may do so by going online and applying for the electronic version of the card that is valid until August 1st, or you may call if you need assistance at 832-393-1313, or go online very simply at houstonlibrary.org. It is a wonderful way to access all kinds of programs and things that can be very helpful now to you as the adult, to you and your students, to you and those teachers, all of us as parents who are trying to be teachers at home. They have great resources to help you also do that. So please, if you don't have a link card, a library card, please avail yourselves of getting one. So this week on this segment of Dialogue Houston, the HPL Houston Public Library Special Edition, Living in New Knowledge, I'm proud to have two guests. In the first segment, we're going to have join us our good friend Helen Chou, who is a Senior Manager of International Services and also the HPL Census 2020 Committee member. She's going to be followed a little later by Gina Reynoso, who is the organizer with the wonderful Gulf Coast Leadership Council and organization that's dear to my heart, because I was around in the beginning when we started, TMO, the Metropolitan Organization, who's going to be telling us more in detail about the work of the committee and how important it is that all of us, as you will hear throughout this segment, there's only one thing to remember from this segment. Census 2020, Census 2020. If you have not done so and filled out your census form, please do so. But first up, let's join our good friend Helen. Helen, how are you?
I'm good. It's so great to be here.
Well, welcome. Welcome to Dialogue Houston.
Thank you so much.
So let's hear from your perspective what we're doing and why it's so important to be involved in this process.
Thanks, Larry. So yes, every 10 years, our country does the phenomenal work of making sure that everybody in the country is counted. And here we are in 2020, a completely unprecedented time. And we find ourselves doing the census in the middle of many things that are competing with that effort. But the principle of everybody being counted should continue to be upheld. The Census Bureau has adjusted the timeline for taking the census and extended it to the end of October. But we are still in great need of reaching out to our neighbors and our friends and our family and asking them to get counted. I just looked at the statistics today. Houston's current response rate is at 51.7%, and the US is at 60.9%. But that means that almost half of Houstonians are not being counted out there. So, when you ask the question, will my neighborhood get a new grocery store? Will our city get better roads? Will we get funding if there's a hurricane? All of those questions are often answered with the data from the census. And so we're here to encourage everybody out there to talk to their friends and family, talk to the people that they meet, look at them and say, are you worth getting counted? And if so, just ask the question, have you done your census? The very good news in Houston is that for the first time in history, both the city of Houston and Harris County have come together to form a joint effort. It's called the Complete Count for Houston. And we have nearly 50 grassroots organizations that are part of that effort, and they're doing everything that they can together under an umbrella called Houston in Action. And they're going out and seeing how we can get the word out, give people access to internet if they want to fill it online, help them if they want to fill it out on the phone, let them know it's available in 13 languages, including Spanish and Vietnamese, Arabic, Chinese, French, Tagalog. You know, there's a lot of resources out there. I think people, they might have heard about it, but the best thing and data shows the best thing is it's when you have a personal connection to someone who's telling you about the census that really gets somebody to actually go and fill it out. You know, it's surprisingly short. You know, you think that with all the talk, it's some very difficult thing, but it's very straightforward, simple, takes less than 5 minutes per person. They're asking you questions. What's your name? What's your age? What's your address? You know, how many people live in your household? So we just really encourage you, everyone out there, to look around, ask the person very simple question: have you filled out your census? And so that's where we are.
And it's very important for so many reasons, and I'm sure we'll get into those in deep a little later with Gina also. But it's so important that we fill the census out because we benefit so much by doing so properly and the numbers being accurate to get back in return. Some will say our fair share, but even that doesn't quite say it. We get what we need to be able to serve our populations.
Absolutely. I mean, if you take a look around different neighborhoods and you wonder why neighborhoods seem to have different resources, many of those resources are distributed based on the census, based on how many people have been counted in your neighborhood. And so when people don't fill out the census, then in essence, they don't exist. But you know, when you see them, they are valuable, and they're, you know, they need to be counted. You know, you're right that we stand to lose a lot if as Houston as a city, but each individual, it's estimated that it's a loss of $1,500 per year. Over 10 years, $15,000 that, you know, is not going to you, not going to your neighborhood. Right. And so, you know, that we can also just think about certain populations that are often maybe people don't realize that they should be counted. So, for example, children under the age of 5. If you just had a baby, that baby counts. People who are renting their homes, don't forget, even though, you know, that feels like you don't own that home, but you still count. You still count in that neighborhood. A lot of the international communities, maybe people who have limited English proficiency, foreign-born community, maybe they're not familiar with the census, they absolutely count. And we actually really, if you want to know more, if you go to Houston in Action's website, it goes deep into which zip code, which neighborhood needs more help. So if you're interested, if your local community center or your nonprofit group that you are part of, or your company, your business wants to do more for the census, you can actually go to maps right now and see which areas are currently underrepresented. And you can find out, you know, you can target that community and you can say, what can I do? And they have many tools and many resources that will help you to figure out how you can help. So some people are walking the streets, some people are doing phone banking, text banking, but again, most of all, I think the most powerful thing is if you personally know somebody, whoever you're with, just ask, hey, have you done census?
In this post-George Floyd environment, you've hit an interesting point that all human beings count. Here's a good example of truly all human beings count in more ways than one. The important, I think, to end on this little note before we take a break is that you're expressing through the necessity and the need for everybody to be counted and to fill out the census form. There are really only two things in a democracy that citizens really are compelled to do and should do for their own benefit and their own behalf. One is voting, and the other one is filling out the census form. One is asked of you only every 10 years, one is asked of you every year. So the question becomes, how do we understand that this is just part of who we are as citizens in a democracy so that we can take full advantage of what it means to be a citizen in a democracy and our common humanity? Let me give you a quick second, any closing thoughts, and we're going to take a small pause and break, and then we'll be joined by our good friend Gina Reynoso.
Thanks, Larry. You hit upon really the core of it. The filling out the census also impacts how much representation we have to elect our president, and to again get resources, get representation in our city government and our state government. And so if you care about the voice that you have and your neighbor has, your brother and sister has, the best thing that you can do is ask them to fill out the census. Make sure that they even have a chance to be represented. Right. So I would just say as a closing thought, the information's out there. If you want to do it online, it's my2020census.gov. There's also a local hotline for Houston in Action. So if you call with any questions, they'll immediately get those addressed. But do it. Say yes to Census 2020. It's easy.
And just do it, basically.
Just do it. Just do it. Say yes.
All right. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you, Larry.
Take a small pause and break, and we'll be joined by Gina. The last point that we're talking about with Helen about democracy, it also kicks in that R word we're going to talk about probably with Gina, that everybody redistricting.
Yep.
So we divide up, city council and state reps and new seats for all of those. And so it really is important in so many ways. All right, we're going to take a small pause and break. As I mentioned, stay tuned. We'll be right back, and we'll be joined by a good friend, Gina Reynoso. Welcome back to this week's segment of Dialogue Houston. If you've been with us for the first part of the show, we had a great conversation with our friend Helen Chou from the Houston Public Library. And we're going to now turn to a deeper dive in looking at the Census 2020 with our good friend Gina Reynoso, who is the organizer and lead organizer with the Gulf Coast Leadership Council and the Metropolitan Organization known as TMO. And Gina is really going to kind of outline for us where we are in this process, what we all can do and need to do, and more importantly, how really, really significant and important this is that we all do our part of filling out our 2020 census form. So welcome, Gina, to Dialogue Houston.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you for having me.
No problem. I've looked forward to having someone from the census to dive deeply into this. So let me just let you start and begin wherever you want to do so.
Again, my name is Gina Reynoso. I am currently the census organizer for Gulf Coast Leadership Council and TMO, the Metropolitan Organization. So TMO is a 40-year-old broad-based organization that's made up of member institutions. And Larry, I'm glad to hear that you are very familiar with the organization.
Found on the founding committee when we brought it to town.
Oh, wow. See, so now we need to have a deeper conversation after the census.
Yes, we will.
our membership, our institutions consist of churches, synagogues, schools, nonprofits, unions, and we organize around issues that affect our families and communities. So issues such as workforce development, more recently along rental and utility assistance, issues such as policing and DACA. And so our approach is not to advocate on behalf of people, but to train people or leaders to advocate for themselves. So Larry, I think you were mentioning this earlier. So for people to put their faith in action and work towards the common good in solidarity with others. And so talking about the census is important in all of this because I think you touched on something very important, Larry, like this is for the common good. And I would even say you recognize the other person, they're being counted, and you're recognizing their dignity as a human being as well.
The census is really something, it's almost like I said about wearing our masks. It's something we do for others as well as ourselves, because it helps the community and the neighborhoods get what they need to be fulfilling and self-sustaining to be able to serve and help all human beings. It's a very selfless thing to fill out the census. It's really about us as a community. You mentioned on something too I wanted to talk about. Tell us more, the faith community in TMO and the Leadership Council, but particularly we've always thought about the churches, houses of worship, church, parish, temple, synagogue, a mosque, Friday, Saturday, Sunday worship, all the same. We've always thought about the houses of worship as a place to reach the largest number of people as they attend services, but now in COVID-19, that's not even possible. But I know you've done a very special outreach to try to make sure that we've contacted, been in touch with all these various denominations to get them internally to engage their people. Have we not?
Yes, that's correct. So I think you've touched on it. So as a result of the consequence that COVID-19 had on families, Christians within their congregations, and through small group conversations, we realized that rental and utility assistance was a very big need among many families. Earlier in May, we had about 25 and 10 clergy go to city council and ask for funding. So it was through these relationships that we were able to organize and win $80 million for families in need of rental and utility assistance. And so we recognize that the amount of funding that both the city of Houston, Harris County, and Fort Bend received was from the CARES Act, and that funding was based on the census count. So that's also why we need to make sure that our families complete the census.
The basis of organizing that you do so well is that part of this exercise in organizing, getting people together to understand their proper roles, duties, responsibilities, and obligations to each other, is that the basis of organizing always says, really, don't do anything for someone that they can do for themselves, right? We try to teach people how important it is to come together in this and really be part of this wonderful fabric and fiber that in concert with their neighbor, in concert with their neighborhood and their friends, allow us all together to go forward. Do we not in this process?
Yeah, and I think that faith-based, especially faith-based institutions are very important in this outreach because they are places of trust. It's where people gather. And the weight of the pastor encouraging their congregation is very important. They have a lot of say. And so like you mentioned, or I think it was Helen that mentioned earlier, it's very difficult because of COVID. People aren't gathering, people are slowly trickling coming back to churches. And so one of our approaches has been to have the pastor preach on it. Maybe he can mention it during his sermon or before the service ends, just as a constant reminder for people to complete the census. And maybe they can inculcate with the scripture, everyone needs to be counted, the dignity of everyone. And I think it's also important what you mentioned earlier that, or at least what I'm hearing a lot, especially in the immigrant community, there's a lot of fear around the census and completing the census. I think it's a very unique opportunity that comes every 10 years for everyone, regardless of citizenship status, to participate and engage in a civic activity.
Yes, this really is about civic engagement and about understanding that process again of citizenship and what does citizenship mean living in a democracy. I think what I've always thought the way TMO approaches this stuff particularly is that it's helping people to understand their common duties, obligations, and responsibilities to each other, and that we all have to help our neighbors be part of this process. So let me just ask this last little question in the time we have left. Where do you see the need to really, and Helen and I have talked about this offline before too, I know that are we gonna have the door-to-door people that we're so used to having for those who have not filled out their census, who have not done so? Because I remember in the 2010 census, we got to the point where the percentage numbers were still low of turnout or those who have fulfilled their census. We had this mass onslaught of people door-to-door canvassing and making sure. I know in COVID-19 that may be another challenge to do so, but are we planning on doing that or not this time?
My understanding is that there will be, I believe they call it like the non-response follow-ups, the beginning of August 11th. I believe it's
Okay.
August 11th.
All
But I
right.
think it's important to let people know, don't wait until that time. I mean,
Right.
I'm sure people, you don't want somebody in a mask coming to knock on your door. They don't want to see you. You probably don't want to see them. Complete it.
And nobody wants to be in that August heat anyway, so let's get it done now in Houston. That's not the time to
Yes.
do it. Give us contact information, email and phone number where folk can reach you, please.
So if there's anyone that's interested in engaging in census outreach, maybe you want to get your church involved or you yourself want to help us either phone bank or just spread the word. You can call our office number. The number is 713-807-1429, or you can send us an email or visit our website. It's tmohouston.org, and we would be more than happy to speak with you.
I want to thank you, Gina, for being part of Dialogue Houston this week, the special edition on living in new knowledge of the Houston Public Library. We'll continue to be in touch. I'll keep plugging and pushing the Census 2020 every week on every show. And we're going to make sure that we try to get everybody involved and part of this. Again, thank you, and we'll be talking, you and I. All right. You know, I think this is an interesting theme you've had in the last shows, the last couple of weeks, that I want to just touch on. I've said before many times, I think that God, Yahweh, Allah, Buddha has a sense of humor. In that COVID-19 and even the issue with Mr. George Floyd now is really an interesting thing when you look at it from this perspective. It's about bringing people together. It's about we and us. It's about our neighbor. It's about who's our neighbor. It's about responding and helping our neighbor. It's about caring with empathy and understanding about our neighbor. It's about our common humanity. All of these things kind of bring home the same theme, that we are all in the same boat together. We're not exactly in the same boat because we're affected differently depending on where you sit and stand, depending on social status and economic status. But we're all, in a sense, in the larger boat together, being affected differently. Some obviously much worse than others with poverty and the health issues and systemic issues of racism and all the things that go with that, inequalities and health disparities. But in the end of the day, it is how we're going to get out of this is going to be through our common humanity, of coming together, of transforming together, looking at our collective inner reflections and how we turn these into outward signs of action that offer hope to each other, that offer hope to our neighbors. So as we tackle the hard work going forward of structural change, be it racism, be it social issues, be it economic issues, they're all about structural change, they're all about policy changes. This thing about being a citizen in a democracy is so important. We love to talk about 2 of the 5 things of what it means being a citizen in a democracy. What are my individual rights and privileges of being a citizen in a democracy? These pandemics of both the racial crisis and the health challenge makes us focus on the other 3 of the 5. And what are our common duties, obligations, responsibilities to whom? The other. To find the other increasingly in our society. Someone different than myself, someone that does not look like me. But what this has shown, how truly we are connected. The interconnectedness, the interdependentness, and the interrelatedness of each other comes clearly in the 2 things we're facing here. So if George 8:46, with reference to the 8 minutes and 46 seconds, by the way, interesting thing, how life does have an interesting perspective. The plane that hit the first tower at 9/11, it hit it at 8:46 a.m. Just an interesting juxtaposition of the time frame on 2001, 9/11. So we are just human beings trying to figure this out together. Let us all work together, continue protect each other, care for each other, do the things we need to do with the masks and the face washing, hand washing, and covering our faces and social distancing to help each other get through this so that we can be there and ready and able, healthy to serve our fellow human beings going forward. We're going to pick up these themes in future shows of Dialogue Houston. For now, we have to go. So as always, we look forward to being with you in weeks to come. And until then, peace, power, and love.